Welcome to the deep dive. This time we're diving into this really cool area, humanistic psychology. You've been digging into some pretty fascinating excerpts about, let's see, Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers. Seems like you're exploring some pretty big questions about human potential. Am I right?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. It's a field just brimming with insights into, what makes us tick. Maslow and Rogers, they basically said, hey, there's more to us than just fixing what's broken. Let's talk about, like, thriving.
I love that. Instead of just analyzing neuroses, these guys were all about like unleashing our best selves. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, can you set the stage for us? What makes humanistic psychology stand out from other approaches?
Well, imagine traditional psychology as a mechanic, right?
Right.
And he's trying to fix a car that's sputtering. And then humanistic psychology comes in and says, hold on, what if we took that same car, tuned it up, and helped it reach its full potential, maybe even win some races?
Okay, so it's less about like fixing what's wrong and more about like becoming the most awesome version of ourselves.
Exactly. It's a breath of fresh air,
Right.
right? Because it focuses on the whole person, their subjective experiences, that inner drive to grow, and this inherent goodness that we all possess.
Now that's a concept I can get behind. So where do Maslow and his famous hierarchy of needs fit into this whole becoming your best self thing?
So Maslow, he was fascinated by what he called self-actualizers,
Mm-hmm.
people who were really, like living up to their potential. Think folks like, Abraham Lincoln, Albert Einstein, Eleanor Roosevelt, people who made a real impact on the world.
Wow, talk about overachievers. Did he find any common threads among these high achievers? What makes a self-actualizer tick?
Well, one surprising thing he found was that they genuinely enjoyed solitude. They were perfectly content, in their own company, comfortable marching to the beat of their own drum. It wasn't about being a social butterfly. It was about being true to themselves.
That's so interesting. It really challenges like the stereotype of what it means to be fulfilled, doesn't it?
It really does. And that's where his hierarchy of needs comes in. He visualized it like a pyramid, with those basic needs at the bottom.
Yeah.
Food, water, shelter, the stuff we need to survive. Once those are met, we crave security, stability, like a safe place to call home, a sense of order in our lives.
Makes sense. You're not going to be too worried about writing the next great American novel if you're worried about where your next meal is coming from.
Exactly. Maslow called those basic needs deficiency needs because they're all about filling a void. But once those are met, we start to crave something more: connection, belonging, self-esteem. These are our growth needs. They're not about filling a void, but about constantly striving to become more.
I can definitely relate to that desire for like something more that need to grow and evolve. So are you telling me that we have to climb this pyramid, step by step, like some kind of personal development ladder?
It's a helpful framework, but of course, real life is a bit messier than a neat and tidy pyramid. But there's definitely something to be said for building a solid foundation. You can't reach your full potential if your basic needs aren't being met, right?
So true. It's like trying to run a marathon on an empty stomach. You've got to fuel up first.
Precisely. And just like a marathon runner needs different types of fuel along the way, we need different things at different stages of our development. Maslow argued that those growth needs are fueled by a desire for self-actualization that drive to become everything we're capable of becoming.
Okay. Now I'm getting chills. So how does Carl Rogers' work tie into this? Was he on board with like Maslow's pyramid scheme?
Rogers definitely shared Maslow's emphasis on self-actualization, but he came at it from a slightly different angle. He drew heavily from his experience as a therapist, focusing on the idea of aligning yourself, who you are at your core, with your ideal self, the person you aspire to be.
Okay, so the smaller the gap between your real self and your ideal self, the more like content and fulfilled you're likely to be.
Exactly. Rogers called that congruence, and he believed that a lack of congruence leads to all sorts of inner turmoil and unhappiness. He also emphasized that this process of, self-discovery and growth thrives in a supportive and accepting environment.
Kind of like a plant needs sunshine and water to flourish.
Exactly. And that's where his famous client-centered therapy comes in, but we'll dive into that a bit later.
I'm ready to hear all about it. But first, I'm
Yeah.
curious about something. When we talk about aligning ourself with our ideal self, are we talking about like becoming some perfect version of ourselves? Because that sounds a bit intimidating, to be honest.
That's a great question. And it actually touches on a common misconception about humanistic psychology. It's not about striving for some unattainable ideal of perfection. It's actually the opposite. It's about embracing our authentic selves, flaws and all, and recognizing that we are all works in progress.
Now that's a relief. So it's more about becoming the most authentic version of ourselves, not some idealized version of what we think we should be.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that our imperfections are part of what makes us unique and lovable. And it's in those imperfections that we often find our greatest strengths, capacity for growth.
Okay, I am loving this perspective. So how does that play out in real life? How can someone start to bridge that gap between their real self and their ideal self?
That's where things get really interesting. And it's something that Rogers explored in depth. It starts with understanding those mixed messages we often receive about who we should be, and then learning to challenge those messages and create our own definition of what it means to live authentically.
You mentioned that Rogers drew from his experience as a therapist. What role did he think therapy played in this process of becoming our most authentic selves?
Well, Rogers believed that therapy could be a powerful tool for self-discovery and growth. He envisioned the therapist not as like an authority figure dispensing advice, but as a compassionate guide, providing what he called unconditional positive regard.
Okay, I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I fully grasp it. Can you break it down for us?
Absolutely. Imagine a space where you feel completely accepted and valued for who you are, without judgment or conditions. Not for what you do, not for your achievements, but simply for being you. That's the essence of unconditional positive regard.
It sounds so simple, yet so profound, like a warm hug for the soul.
It really is. And Rogers believed that this type of unconditional acceptance, particularly from parents or caregivers during childhood, is crucial for developing a healthy sense of self-worth.
So those early experiences can really set the stage for how we view ourselves and our place in the world.
Absolutely. But here's the good news. Even if we didn't receive that unconditional love and acceptance growing up, we can still learn to cultivate it within ourselves and in our relationships with others.
That's so reassuring to hear. So how do we do that? How do we cultivate this unconditional positive regard for ourselves and others, even if those early experiences weren't so great?
It's a journey, and it takes conscious effort. Therapy can be incredibly helpful, providing a supportive space to explore those deep-seated beliefs and patterns that might be holding us back.
Hmm?
But it can also be cultivated through mindfulness practices, self-compassion, and surrounding ourselves with people who uplift and support us.
It's about creating that sense of safety and acceptance within ourselves and in our relationships.
Exactly. And when we experience that kind of unconditional love and acceptance, it allows us to let go of those defenses, those masks we wear to protect ourselves from getting hurt.
It frees us to be our most authentic selves.
Exactly. And that's where the real magic happens. When we can show up as our true selves, flaws and all, we open ourselves up to deeper connections, greater fulfillment, and a more meaningful life.
This has been an incredible deep dive. Thank you for walking us through the fascinating world of humanistic psychology. Any final thoughts for our listener before we wrap up?
Remember, you are a work in progress, always evolving and growing. Embrace your imperfections, celebrate your strengths, and never stop exploring the amazing potential that lies within you.
Beautifully said. It's been a pleasure diving deep with you. That's a wrap on this deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed exploring the world of humanistic psychology with us.
Of course, no theory is perfect, right?
Right.
One of the main criticisms of Maslow's hierarchy is that it can feel, a bit rigid, like, can we really put human needs into like these neat little boxes and say, okay, you've checked off belonging, now move on to esteem?
Yeah.
Life's not always that linear, right?
Yeah, it's like that old saying, like is what happens when you're busy making other plans. Like sometimes we're juggling, needs from multiple levels of the pyramid at the same time.
Exactly. And some critics argue that Maslow's method of identifying those self-actualized individuals wasn't very well scientific.
Yeah.
He kind of like hand-picked people he admired, which could be seen as a bit subjective.
So there's a question of bias and whether his definition of self-actualization holds up across, different cultures and time periods.
Precisely. But even with those criticisms, the hierarchy of needs remains a really useful framework for understanding, what motivates us, what we need to thrive. It's like a map. It might not reflect every twist and turn in the road, but it gives us a starting point and a sense of direction.
I love that analogy. Okay, so we've talked about the criticisms. Now let's dive back into those juicy details. I'm I'm dying to hear more about each level of the pyramid. What are those like specific needs that we're all striving to fulfill?
Okay. Okay, picture this. You're lost in the wilderness, right?
Okay.
No phone, no map, nothing but the clothes on your backs.
Hmm.
Suddenly, everything else fades away, your job, your Instagram feed, all that stuff doesn't matter. You're consumed by the need for shelter, for food and water, for sleep.
Talk about a reality check. I can't imagine being in that situation.
That's Maslow's first level. Physiological needs.
Yeah.
It's about pure survival.
Yeah.
The absolute essentials we need to stay alive.
It really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? We take those basic needs for granted sometimes.
Yeah.
So once those are, somewhat stable, what's next?
Think about that feeling of relief when you find shelter from a storm. You're still on high alert, but at least you're safe from the elements. That's where safety and security needs come in, the need for order and predictability.
Like knowing that your basic needs will be met tomorrow and the day after that.
Exactly. It's about feeling safe from harm, both physically and emotionally. Having a stable job, a secure home, a reliable healthcare system, those are all part of meeting those safety needs.
It's like building a solid foundation for your house. You need that strong base to feel secure. So we're feeling safe and sound. Our basic needs are met. What's the next step up Maslow's pyramid?
This is where things get really interesting. We humans are social creatures, right?
Yeah.
We crave connection, belonging, love. Think about the last time you felt truly seen and understood by another person, like they really got you.
That feeling of belonging, of being part of something, bigger than yourself, it's the best.
Exactly. And it's not just about, romantic relationships. It's about feeling a sense of connection to your family, your friends, your community, even your coworkers.
It's like that warm, fuzzy feeling you get when you're surrounded by, people who love and support you.
Exactly. Now imagine you're part of a team and your contributions are recognized and appreciated. You feel a sense of accomplishment, of pride in your abilities.
Okay, now we're getting to the good stuff. Esteem needs.
You got it. This level is all about feeling confident and valued both by ourselves and by others. It's about achieving things in life, gaining recognition for our accomplishments, and building a strong sense of self-worth.
So there's like an internal and an external component to this level.
Absolutely. There's the esteem we receive from others, recognition, respect, appreciation. But just as important is the internal piece, our own self-evaluation, our self-respect, and our sense of competence and mastery.
So it's not just about others validating us, it's also about recognizing our own worth.
Precisely. It's about finding that balance between external validation and internal self-assurance.
Okay, we've climbed our way to the top of the pyramid, the summit, Mount Maslow self-actualization. Tell us more about this pinnacle of human potential.
This is the big one, but it's also the most difficult to define because it's going to look different for everyone.
Right.
Remember those exemplary figures Maslow studied?
Yeah.
He didn't find a one-size-fits-all definition of self-actualization, but rather a set of shared qualities and tendencies.
Okay, I'm ready for some aha moments. What did he learn about these self-actualized individuals? What set them apart?
Well, one thing he noticed was their ability to live in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't dwelling on the past or worrying about the future. They're fully engaged in the here and now, experiencing life with a sense of wonder and appreciation.
Easier said than done, right?
You bet. But these self-actualizers seem to have a knack for it. They were also incredibly problem-focused. Instead of getting bogged down by challenges, they saw them as opportunities for growth and learning.
I love that, turning those lemons into lemonade. What else?
They had a strong sense of personal ethics and values. They were driven by a desire to make a difference in the world, to contribute something meaningful.
So it's not just about like personal fulfillment, it's also about like making a positive impact on the world around us.
Exactly. They were driven by a sense of purpose, a desire to use their gifts and talents to make the world a better place.
Wow. Talk about like inspiring role models. It's like they were living life on a whole other level.
And that's the thing about self-actualization. It's
Yeah.
not a destination, but a journey, a constant striving to become the best version of ourselves.
I love that. But you mentioned earlier that even these self-actualized individuals weren't perfect. What did you mean by that?
Maslow found that they could be forgetful or overly kind at times. Some even had quirks that might be considered flaws by others, you know.
Yeah.
But you realize that perfection isn't the goal.
Yeah.
It's about striving for growth and authenticity, even with our imperfections.
So it's not about being like flawless, but about embracing our, our authentic selves.
Exactly, and that's an important message for all of us. Now, I know we've been talking a lot about Maslow, but Rogers had some equally fascinating ideas about self-actualization, particularly when it comes to that idea of aligning yourself with your ideal self.
I'm ready to dive into Roger's perspective, but first, a quick question. In our previous episodes, you've talked about flow state, about getting lost in the moment when we're completely engaged in something we love. Would Maslow consider that flow state like a part of self-actualization or a side effect of it?
That's a brilliant question, and it actually touches on a concept that Maslow called peak experiences.
Okay.
He described these as moments of intense joy, wonder, and awe, a kind of transcendence that often occurs when we're fully immersed in an activity we're passionate about.
So like those aha moments you mentioned earlier.
Exactly. These peak experiences could be anything from artistic creation to connecting deeply with nature to achieving a personal best in athletics.
Wow.
Maslow saw these experiences as glimpses into the potential of self-actualization, a taste of what it feels like to be fully alive and in tune with ourselves and the world around us.
Okay, that makes so much sense. So these peak experiences are like signposts pointing us towards self-actualization, but not the destination itself.
Precisely. It's in those moments of flow, of complete absorption in the present moment, that we get a taste of what it means to be fully self-actualized.
Wow, that's powerful stuff. All right, let's shift gears now and delve into Carl Rogers' unique perspective on self-actualization. What were his key insights into this concept? Okay, so we're back with Carl Rogers. Remind us again, how did his view of self-actualization differ from Maslow's?
Well, you see, while Maslow focused on those already self-actualized rock stars, Rogers was all about the process, the journey we all take toward becoming our true selves.
Mm-hmm.
He believed self-actualization wasn't just for a select few, but an innate drive within every single one of us.
That's like we all have that potential simmering inside, just like waiting to be unleashed.
Exactly. But Rogers also recognized that it's not always easy. We're bombarded with messages about who we should be, what success looks like, what others expect from us. It's like trying to find your own voice in a crowded room.
Can you give us an example of those mixed messages? Something we might encounter in our daily lives.
Think about social media.
Okay.
We're constantly bombarded with these curated versions of other people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect vacations, picture perfect families, incredible career wins.
Right.
It's easy to start comparing ourselves and feeling like we're not measuring up, not realizing that those are just carefully constructed snapshots, not the whole picture.
That's so true. It's like everyone else is winning some imaginary race, and we're stuck at the starting line.
And those messages aren't just coming from external sources. Sometimes the most critical voice in our heads is our own inner critic.
Yeah.
That voice that tells us we're not good enough, smart enough, or successful enough.
Ugh, tell me about it. That inner critic can really sabotage our efforts to grow and change.
Absolutely. So navigating those mixed messages, both internal and external, is a big part of what Rogers called becoming a person.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell us more about this becoming a person business.
Rogers believed that as we grow, we develop a concept of self, who we think we are. We also have an ideal self, who we think we should be. And also there's a gap between those two selves, which can lead to feelings of incongruence, like we're not living in alignment with our true selves.
It's like that feeling when you're trying to squeeze into a pair of jeans that are clearly a size too small. It's just not a good fit.
Perfect analogy. And that's where Rogers' concept of unconditional positive regard comes in.
Okay, you mentioned this earlier, but I'm still a little fuzzy on the details. Can you elaborate?
Imagine a space where you feel completely accepted and valued for who you are, without judgment or conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Not for what you do, not for your achievements, but simply for being you. That's the essence of unconditional positive regard.
This sounds so simple, yet so profound, like a warm hug for the soul.
It really is. And Rogers believed that this type of unconditional acceptance, particularly from parents or caregivers during childhood, is crucial for developing a healthy sense of self-worth.
So those early experiences can really set the stage for how we view ourselves and, our place in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. But here's the good news. Even if we didn't receive that unconditional love and acceptance growing up, we can still learn to cultivate it within ourselves and in our relationships with others.
That's so reassuring to hear. So how do we do that? How do we cultivate this unconditional positive regard for ourselves and others, even if those early experiences weren't so great?
It's a journey, and it takes conscious effort. Therapy can be incredibly helpful, providing a supportive space to explore those deep-seated beliefs and patterns that might be holding us back. But it can also be cultivated through mindfulness practices, self-compassion, and surrounding ourselves with people who uplift and support us.
It's about creating that sense of safety and acceptance within ourselves and in our relationships.
Exactly. And when we experience that kind of unconditional love and acceptance, it allows us to let go of those defenses, those masks we wear to protect ourselves from getting hurt.
It frees us to be our most authentic selves.
Exactly. And that's where the real magic happens. When we can show up as our true selves, flaws and all, we open ourselves up to deeper connections, greater fulfillment, and a more meaningful life.
This has been an incredible deep dive. Thank you for walking us through the fascinating world of humanistic psychology. Any final thoughts for our listener before we wrap up?
Remember, you are a work in progress, always evolving and growing. Embrace your imperfections, celebrate your strengths, and never stop exploring the amazing potential that lies within you.
Beautifully said. It's been a pleasure diving deep with you. That's a wrap on this deep dive. We hope you've enjoyed exploring the world of humanistic psychology with us.
Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with your friends. Your support helps us keep creating valuable content like this. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. Join our community for more insights into psychology and personal development. Let's grow and learn together. See you in the next video.